Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Module 5. And today we're going to look at how to execute data-driven creative. Quick intro of who we are. These sessions are run by myself and Marcel. So I'm the creative lead here at Google, and Marcel is the Google Marketing Platform lead. So a super quick overview of all the modules that we have covered. If you haven't seen any of them, please do jump on the other videos and check them out. So the first module is a quick look at DV360 and the templates that can be used by creatives. Then we jump into module 2, where we do a quick intro into Google Web Designer. What is it, how does it work, and where to get it. Then we look at module 3, which is Google Web Designer components, basically looking at the heart of how Google Web Designer works. And then we jump into module 4, where we look at how to build responsive ads within Google Web Designer. And then, of course, today we're looking at how to execute data-driven creative. And then the last video that we'll do will be module 6, how to build microsites within a banner. So basically making it interactive. And then you'll see we have a blank block at the end. This is really based on any future feedback that we might get. We might do some more videos answering questions that we get from whoever might have some. So just to quickly jump into today's content, it's divided into 3 parts. The first part we're going to look at is why do data-driven creative? Why is it important? And then we're going to jump into how to build data-driven creative. So myself and Marcel are going to jump into the tools and actually show you how to build the creative and the flow of building. And then the last bit is the connection between media and creative teams. So let's quick jump into the session. Why data-driven creative is important. So a lot of you may have seen or heard of this, but 70% of campaign performance is due to creative. And the reason why we highlight this is it doesn't matter how well you optimize from the media side or anything else that you do. If the creative is not strong enough and you don't pay enough attention to it, the campaign will not perform well. And it's super important to keep that in mind, and especially when creatives are creating, to start thinking about creating with relevance in mind. And a big part of what I talk about in this video is how do we keep our content relevant, and why is it important to keep our content relevant? So when I talk about relevance, and the definition in this context is divided into 5 pillars. So 1 is recognize me. So show that you recognize who I am. 2, treat me as an individual. So serve me the stuff that I am interested in, the stuff that I have affinities to. Make it easy. Easy for me to then interact with you as the brand. Anticipate my needs throughout my journey. Then give me a voice, so value my opinions and give me the tools to be able to share. So let's look at what relevance is not, right? So a good example is this person here. We all know who he is. He's Prince Charles. He's born in 1948. He grew up in England. He's married twice, has children, is wealthy, and loves dogs. So when we look at demographics, this is what we might clash into. Here's another person. His name is Ozzy Osbourne. He was born in 1948, grew up in England, married. So this is what demographics is. This is not relevance, right? And what we're trying to land today is really using data to serve content that is relevant to people. And this is where data-driven creative comes in. So a person who says it quite well is the VP of product at Netflix. Demographic information is almost useless. And the reason why he says this, especially based on his platform, is that they're finding on Netflix that 70-year-old women are watching Breaking Bad and 90-year-old boys are watching Dance Moms, right? So if they had to have served them based on straightforward demographics, they would get it completely wrong. And not just a few times, but majority of times. So it's super important to serve relevant content to the relevant people. Another good example is just general stereotypes that we come across. So as you can see in the visual here, sports is generally associated with being a man's game. Gaming is in the same way for kids. Women are homemakers and men buy cars. But when we look at the data, 60% of sports goods shoppers who engage with relevant YouTube content are female. 45% of people who do video game searches are 35 and up. 40% of home good searches are done by men, and 60% of order searches are done by female. So, it's really important to start utilizing data as a tool for inspiring what the creative will look like. So, if we take the science of data, add that, and combine that with the art of creative, we get this magic which is called data-driven creative. And in order to do data-driven creative, you need specific tools to do that creative. And we'll show you later on when we demo myself and Marcel. So there are three personalization methods that you can use to build data-driven creative. So one being dynamic creative, which I'll jump into the detail in the coming slides, decisioning and storytelling. So dynamic creative, so changing relevant elements in real time to deliver the most relevant ads. I'll give you a few examples just so you can get an understanding of what I'm talking about. So the first example is changing the title using the signal of hour a day. So you might be a food company, and in the morning you might have a different message to lunchtime as to dinner. And same goes for when we talk about days. During the week, your content might be different to whatever your offering might be on the weekend. And then if you go on to the next section, so changing images according to remarketing signals. So if I went onto a e-commerce site and I looked at watches, the display assets that I might see then will probably show me watches because that I have an interest for purchasing watches. And then the last one of the examples is changing the call to action according to geolocation. So if I'm at home, your call to action might be different to if I'm close to a mall, where you're more likely to say go to the shop, go to your nearest shop and purchase. So you can really play around with your location there, and also you can change out whatever it is that you're offering based on interest in specific locations. So in Cape Town, they might be interested in red shirts, whereas in Joburg, they're mostly interested in blue shirts. So a good example is this brand. What they did was they used the signal of weather. So if you are in a place where it's raining, they'll show you clothes that are more suitable for rain. If you are in places where it's snowing, they'll show you examples which are more suitable for snow. Same goes for sun. So this is just an example based on weather, but just to note that weather can't be used on DV3. Weather signals can't be used on DV360 at the moment. The next example is decisioning. So choosing the most engaging ad for the audience and their stage in the journey. So Netflix does this quite well. So what they'll do is they'll create one asset, and then they'll target different people who've got different interests. So movie lovers, action lovers, and fashion. And what they'll do is they'll have, so we'll look at the movie lovers one. So they'll have on the first frame, copy that speaks to movie lovers. In the second frame, they'll have a visual or that speaks to movie lovers, and then close off with the call to action. So on action, they'll do the same kind of change with copy and then visual and then call to action. Same goes with fashion. Then they take it a step further, that if you are in a specific region, so if I'm in South Africa, I'll see maybe a different type of call to action versus somebody who's in the Netherlands. And then they also take it another step further when it comes to language. So if I am in England, I'll see different language versus France. And then storytelling. So storytelling allows you to tell a sequence of stories through your assets. So I'll give you an example. So I might show you first a video asset, and then after that show you something that's more linked to driving you towards consideration, and then something that's more action driven, like buy now, and then something that's more loyalty driven, something that shows you brands that might be associated to what you are selling, or loyalty programs. So even in this, you can get quite dynamic in it also. So if I'm in Cape Town, I might see a different video to a person in Joburg. If I'm in the United States, I might see a call to action that's completely different to a person that's in Nigeria. So even in this, you can get quite data driven in your approach, whilst also telling a sequential story. So it makes it for quite an engaging and personal story. So Marcel's going to quickly take us through what clients are looking to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Art. Yeah, I think in terms of what clients are looking to do, I work with a lot of local clients, and it seems like everyone is trying to do some sort of data-driven creative or personalization at scale or multivariant testing. It seems like everyone's read a similar white paper, and everyone's very keen to kind of do this. And most of the kind of aspects, or most of the three areas where I see clients are focusing on, is the first one is geolocation. Art has really touched on this, is where most brands want to serve a different message to a different region and potentially in a different language. Here's a great example of Netflix again, with the show Narcos, where they rolled out different creators for different regions at scale. And what they essentially did here was they built a template, and then they had different elements that were changeable. So one example would be like, to a US-based audience, they potentially everything would be in English, and then to a Colombian audience, they would have kind of it focused towards that, and then also looking at the imagery, they were able to swap that out. So maybe they thought for the Colombian audience, they might show a picture of Colombia in the background. Maybe that will resonate more. But you can essentially see what they did here was they scaled it based on different regions and different markets and different languages, which is really awesome. And this is how they launch shows. They can't roll out banners for every single market, for every single language. They need to use kind of technology and scale and put a little bit of templates and little areas that can switch out and switch in. And some stats that we've got in terms of kind of Google data is that we saw that if by just changing, data-driven creative customize on geography, so something like, hey Joburg, hey Cape Town, you show different banners to Joburg, different Cape, or to Edenvale, or whatever the case may be, brands were seeing a 46% reduction in cost per acquisition, which is an amazing result in terms of just showing a different creative to a different city. I mean, that's insane. With such subtle changes, you can see some big impacts. And then the second point is around scheduled updates or monthly creative. This is my favorite one, is where we work with brands, and then they have an always on creative that it's always on because it never gets changed. You should be updating your creative as much as possible, but usually what the struggle is that they call it kind of creative fatigue, or they want to change creatives as much as possible, but essentially they can't. Because it takes so long for the rollout, etc. But all they really want to do is change a little image on the first frame or a bit of copy, just to make it a bit more refresh for the next month. These can be templated and made a little bit simpler. And then there's also a thing around kind of scheduled updates. So think about like Black Friday, when you want to do a countdown, 10 days, 9 days, 8 days, 7 days. There's ways to help you scale this where you're only changing a little piece of the banner. Please do not roll out creatives for every single day. That's a waste of time, waste of money, and it just doesn't make sense in terms of the setup. So essentially, you can kind of set this up in certain ways, in smart ways, to change certain things on creative, where you've got the initial template set up, but only changing one or two minimal things on the banner, which is huge impact. By just changing one or two things, you can have great impact on this. And then lastly, this is the one that everyone wants to do. This is audience targeting. So how can you serve a relevant message to a specific audience? This is probably the one that everyone wants to do, everyone's trying to do, and everyone doesn't know where to start. So in the second session of this, or a bit later, we actually dive into how can you get started with specifically more around the audience piece. But I'm going to deep dive more into this case study now. And this was L'Oreal. This is a great case study. This is a great way on terms of how they did data-driven creative. What I love about this case study is that it was simple, but huge impact. Where essentially what L'Oreal was doing, they're selling the same product. So if you look at the banners that are flicking through there, they were selling the same product. But what they essentially wanted to do was make it a little bit more relevant to people, or to their target audience, based on their passion points or their audience signals, etc., etc. So, one would be travel, one would be music, entertainment, etc., etc. And if you're looking at the banner, let's start with the one on the right-hand side. You can see the one on the right-hand side was targeted probably to an entertainment or movie fan. And you can see the copy just changes. Movies getting great reviews, get great reviews for your hair too. Simple text changes, but the banner is the same. So if we look in the middle one, it says, just 30 minutes to brown hair, probably targeting like something like 30-minute chefs or someone who has strapped for time. Really nice way in terms of just changing text and having a huge impact. I mean, the results speak for themselves. They rolled at 100,000 creatives. I mean, there's a link at the bottom where you can go read more on how they did it. And then they added some additional things around time of day, geo, call to actions, and things like this. But just a simple change with a bit of text and then make it personalized. Amazing example of how you can do this at scale. So how do we build data-driven creative? I think this is the biggest question, and this is why you're on this session. So, this is probably the hardest piece. No one knows where to get started. So we're going to do a bit of a demo around a brand called YOLO. We're going to build essentially a basic kind of data-driven creative, where we're going to choose a few elements around it. But we just want to show you the process around this and what steps you can take to actually execute on your side. Yes, it's not the perfect kind of banner or execution. It's just to show you more of the steps that we want to follow. So if we jump into the steps, the 6 steps kind of at Google or where we feel is the best way to kind of execute data-driven creative is really around these 6 steps. And the key thing is around it has to be collaborative. So you've got media agencies, you've got clients, you've got creative agencies. So this template or this framework is supposed to help you essentially kind of navigate this world, because it can be confusing. Who's supposed to do what? How are we supposed to do it? What is the other person doing? So we've kind of built these 6 steps. One is around the brief, one is around the insights, one is around creative, then production and media and measure. But I'm going to kind of jump into those now. So on the first one, when we talk about brief, this is also a tricky one because you could have started with insights. Not all brands really start with insights and then the brief, but it all just depends on how you want to execute this. But let's say we started on the brief, and essentially on the digital brief, this is to get everyone to align. And this is usually what happens. When we say, hey, let's collaborate on the brief, you by yourself, there's no one else. No one collaborates. The briefs get sent to multiple agencies, creative, media, whatever the case may be, and then you're just supposed to come back with different presentations that make no sense. With data-driven creative and personalization, they have to be intertwined and they have to kind of collaborate together. You have to speak to one another to actually execute this. This is really the only way that you can kind of get to the next step. So on what we kind of did for this example is we wanted to just get a little basic brief. I mean, hopefully you get more in your briefs than this, but on the YOLO brand, in terms of selling shirts, we wanted to target men who are between the ages of 25 and 45 in South Africa. And our objective is really just to sell shirts. And this was essentially the brief. I mean, hopefully we get more and hopefully collaborate a little bit more. But essentially, once you've collaborated, everyone agrees on the brief, everyone understands what the executions are around this brief, and kind of named key people that's going to drive it from a media and creative side, you want to move into the next step. So that's around kind of gathering insights. So you've got this brief. Now, what do? You've got the brief. How do you gather insights from all the data sources that's available to you? There's certain areas where you can do this, which I'm going to quickly touch on. But you've got so much data. It's actually when we chat to clients and that they actually don't know the amount of wealth of data that they have, or at least to get the insights out of it, because data is something different to insights, and that's usually where most brands struggle. Is there's loads of Excel reports and things like this, but what is it actually the data is saying? So there's some nice ways that you can actually get some insights. So we've got something within Display and Video 360 called an audience module. Which essentially allows you to select an audience. So say it's everyone who's converted or bought a shirt previously, you could select that audience, and essentially what the data would show you is that they're not just then we shouldn't just be targeting males. We should be looking at males, females. We should be looking at different audience segments, etc. So a great tool for you to use in terms of Display and Video 360. You also have campaign data, which essentially is all that past history of what campaigns you've run previously, bring those insights into this. Think about different channels, think about different creatives, think about different segments that you're doing that really performed well. Your client also has potentially amazing CRM data to look at what potentially they have offline. And this is always a tricky one. You don't want to just rely on just one data source like offline data. You want to look at it from an offline and an online perspective. Just because an example I always give is, I'm with a bank and they know that I signed up in a certain area 15 years ago, but I haven't lived in that area for 14 years. So I've changed, potentially things around me have changed. So what is my digital signals looking like with my offline signals? So how can you kind of tie those two pieces together? We've also got some great external tools like Google Trends, and then analytics data. So similar to this audience module piece that I've got here, you can really deep dive and unpack different segments, affinities, audiences, interests, to help inform more of your strategy and potentially challenge the brief. Potentially the brief was something, and now you've got data to challenge the brief and maybe pivot or test some new things. And this gives you ideas in terms of what this audience looks like. They're not just the 25s to 45s. They actually have interests, and how can you speak to those interests to get the creative to be a little bit more personalized and relevant. So for this example, this is not real data, but for this example, we deep dived into some data sources we had. This is a very simple example of what we came about. But when we're looking at the data, you can see we've grayed out males, 25 to 40. We don't want to target just males by looking at the data. And then when we were looking at more of the segments, what we did see that sports was a big factor, entertainment and travel. These are the three segments that we thought that had a big relevance to our current audience. So essentially what we did was we wanted to unpack these. And this is how you should think about data-driven creative: is what segments or audiences are you going to target? And my recommendation would be, start with maybe 3 to 5 to test. Don't go full L'Oreal on us and do lots, but rather start with like 3 to 5, and then start developing kind of what that creative could be to those different segments, and then run a test and see if it's worth it. Maybe it's just worth running generics. Most of the clients you do work with, it's much better to do personalized, but it's always best to test versus going down a long road and long journey. So again, I'm just saying start small and then you can start scaling. Cool. And then you want to start designing and developing your custom format. But this is where we hand over more to the creative agency. So I'm going to hand over a little bit more to Art to take us through step 3.
Thanks, Marcel. So you've got your brief, you've got your insights. Now you need to start planning as to how you start building. And this is quite a critical part of the process, because what happens is that we go straight from brief, past insights, past the creative planning, and go straight into production, which is step number 4. For data-driven creative, it's important to sit and focus on this bit a bit. So what we do is we'll get the art director or graphic designer to design the actual asset itself, and then we'll look at the insights and the data that we've got, and we'll then start to look at what needs to be changeable within the actual display asset. So we know that, so our asset's been designed and it looks like so. So we know that based off what we've received, that in Joburg, this particular T-shirt is doing pretty well. So we're going to make sure that in Joburg we show this. But we also want to make sure that in different regions we can change out the T-shirt based on the information that we've got. So this middle piece has to be interchangeable. Same goes with the call to action. We know that call to actions within different regions work differently. So this is going to be changeable. So the stuff that's not going to be changeable is the background. It's going to be fixed, and the logo is going to be fixed. But shirt and call to action are going to be changeable. So our template, when we start building, which I'm going to jump into Google Web Designer now, is going to be very much structured around making a rule, which is called a dynamic binding, that says once this asset goes into DV360, the image in the middle will be changeable and from directly in DV360, and this text will be changeable from directly in DV360. This gives us the power to be able to do the kind of changes that L'Oreal did in the previous section, where we can have 100 iterations of one asset. And then once we've done that and we know what our structure is going to be, we then jump into the production phase, which is the phase I'm going to jump into now. So I'm going to quickly jump into Google Web Designer. So here's Google Web Designer. If you've missed any of the previous sessions, please check out modules 1 to 4 to see how to download Google Web Designer and how to play around with the basic features to be able to start building a creative asset. So I'm going to quickly jump into this. So you're going to click on create a new file. So we, based off the asset that we were provided in our brief, I'm going to create a 300 by 250. I'm going to call this YOLO shirts, and I'm going to leave everything else as is because it's perfectly fine as is. I'm going to click on OK. So I can see on my timeline here, on my canvas, that I'm missing a timeline. So I'm going to click on here, click on timeline. The reason why I want a timeline is that there's going to be a bit of an animation that happens in my design. So the assets are pre-designed by our creative director, our graphic designer, as I mentioned earlier on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the assets that he's designed. So I'm going to open up my folder, and then I'm going to go into my assets. So I've asked him to send me the assets as transparent PNGs. You can also send through JPEGs. It's really up to you what works. So I'm going to drag directly onto my canvas. And as you can see, the logo is there. It's just the background that's there. So since I know I'm going to be doing an animation, I prefer to work with a frame by frame animation. So I clicked on the blocks, but you can work on any timeline that you want to work on. So I'll jump back and I'll grab my assets. You'll notice that I'm placing it on the side because I wanted to animate into the banner. So I've placed it on the side like so. I also want to add a button. I'm going to drag that in, and I'm going to place the button in the frame. I'm going to put some text on here, which is going to be buy now. I'm going to change the copy to Arial Black and make that white and center it. Looks like so. Right. Fairly centered. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the animation bit of it. So I'm going to click plus, which duplicates the frame. On the second one, I'm going to slide in my shirt. So it's like so. As you can see that line there, that line shows me the path of animation. I can click on here to decide on how fast or how slow I want my animation to be. So I'm going to make it about so. So just under a second. And then I'm going to click on preview, click on Chrome. And as you can see, it slides through quite well. I'm happy with the banner asset. And because I want to make sure that everybody is keeping approvals during the creation process, I can click here, get the shareable link, share it with share the banner as it is with the designer, whoever initially designed it, so they can make sure that I haven't messed up the design in any way. And if they give the thumbs up, I come back into the asset. So now I've got the approval from the designer. I'm good to go, or from the client or whoever you're going to send it to. So now, as mentioned beforehand, there are two pieces that need to get rules that allow this shirt to be changeable and this to be changeable. And those are called dynamic bindings. So I click on the t-shirt. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to click dynamic binding. I'm going to select a standard schema. This is brand awareness. And so this is the element attribute is a source. And this is a background image. Click OK. So what that's done is I've created a rule that says now that if and when if I upload this file to DV360, Marcel, who is my media agency, will be able to make a change to that specific file. I'm going to do the exact same thing here. I'm going to do a dynamic binding. So what this is text content, and this is text content. I'm going to click OK. So I've added that same rule here. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to jump into my preview one more time. But what you'll notice beforehand, remember I only had one of these as a sample. Now I have two. So this is the original artwork. This is the new artwork I've created now with changeable assets. So as you can see, it says here additional text. It means that it's ready to take input for the text, and I'm able to change here. So I can look at the the new version just by itself, or look at both versions. Again, I can send those for approval if I want to. I can also control how that my text does not fall over. So I can set rules on how much text I can put on here. For those of you who are concerned that when you put into DV360, they might make the call to action too long and it might fall off the button. You can control all that kind of stuff. So now, the last and most important thing that you need to do is add a tab area. As if you've been in any of the previous trainings I've done, you'll note that the tab area is the most important of the tab area of the components, because every single banner has to have a tab area. DV360 will not accept a banner without a tab area, because the tab area makes the banner direct to a specific page, or it can be a website, social media page, YouTube, whatever. What I like to usually do is I like to make the tab area slightly bigger than the button, because I'm thinking also for mobile, so that it's easy to click onto the button. So I've got the tab area there. So here I need to add an event. So I need to tell this tab area what it needs to, where it needs to send the clicker to. So add an event. So this is a tab area. So when you touch and click it, this is a Google ad. Once you click it, it will exit the ad. I'll click on there. So I need to add a matrix ID. So I'm going to call this click YouTube. All right, you can call it whatever you want to call it. And then the URL is going to be HTTP. You have to type in the website in full, google.com. So you can't do this without the HTTP. You have to type it out in full. And if you get it wrong, it will give you that red line, which means that you're missing something. So always make sure that it's the full URL with the HTTP in front of it. Then I click OK. And I jump into preview again, go into Chrome. And I can see that I have a live area here that I can click that will send me to the page that I need to go to. So I've done this. The banner is pretty much ready. So what I do now is I'll publish it. So I can publish it locally to my desktop. So I can make a zip folder that goes directly to my desktop that I can email to the media agency or whoever's in charge of DV360. I can also save to my Google Drive. I can upload directly into Studio, which is not a tool that we are talking about in this series. Or you can upload directly into DV360 straight from Google Web Designer. So I'm going to publish locally to my drive. Most important thing to look at here when you get here is to look for this tick. If you see this tick, that means that your asset is ready to go into DV360. There's nothing missing. You have your tab areas. There's no errors. There's nothing that's wrong. So if you get this, you're good to go. Then I press publish, and it saves directly onto my desktop. So Marcel will take us through what happens in DV360. What we're going to quickly do is I'm going to start presenting, and Marcel will present from his side.
Cool. Thanks, Art. You should be able to see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome. So what Artwell did there was essentially build kind of the creative with those dynamic rules in Google Web Designer, and now we've got that template. So this next step could either be done by the creative agency or it could be done by the media agency. It really doesn't matter. It's ways you need to kind of figure out how it works. But essentially, like Artwell said, is we want to take it from Google Web Designer. We want to now push it to the DV360. So he's emailed me in the background, and I've got the zip file and the HTML zip file that he shared with me. So what I want to do now is open up DV360 and upload that creative. Give me 1 second. So within DV360, now I want to upload that creative. So I'm going to say, let me upload a new creative. Remember, it's not a GIF, it's an HTML5 that we build in Google Web Designer. So you're looking for HTML5. So you click on that. We're going to give the creative a test, so a name. So we're going to say YOLO shirt brand. And then what I want to do is upload that zip file. So essentially, let me look for that zip file. Give me 1 second. Essentially, what I want to do is upload that zip file that Artwell sent to me. Here you go. Give it a few seconds. And now, if you watch module 1, you would see it. It's a very similar kind of piece where I was touching on how you can use the ad canvas in DV360 essentially, but it gives you all this functionality. So what you can see now is that template that Artwell gave me. So the shirt's not there, and it says additional text. So I need to add in that text. But I've got those loose images of those shirts to target different kind of audiences, etc. So if I wanted to, let's say, I think based on our kind of audience segments, we can call this version 1. Let's say this is targeting sports enthusiasts, and we want to add in the shirt. So I just say upload. I look for the shirt that Artwell shared with me, and I've got that here. Give me 1 second. Let's give the sports guys the blue shirt. And what you'll see is now that image won't appear just yet. There you go. And then if I preview it, you'll see it'll have that animations that Art put in it. So moving from the right to the middle, which is awesome. But I need to change this additional text. So he's also given me the ability to change it. So what we want to do is say buy now, which is great. And now we can make multiple copies because we've got the template, etc. We can make multiple copies. So potentially we want to do maybe version 2 is to, I think we said entertainment, and potentially we want to show them a different color shirt, etc., etc. So let's look for the shirt. There we go. And then we can say, once that's done, give it a second. Cool. Now everyone's got buy now. Potentially we want to test. I could have done this for all the audience segments, but just to show you an example. And now potentially what you want to see is that you've got these 2 segments. And potentially I want to change buy now to shop now to test the call to actions. All I need to do is select both of these, say make copy, and then it gives me a copy exactly of those 2 elements. And then what I can do now is just edit here and say shop now. And now I've got different banners for different audience segments, and I'm testing different call to actions. To just do this by itself, to test different call to actions or messaging, you would have probably rolled out different banner sets, etc., etc. Please don't go down that route. Think about the template, think about the execution, because once you're in here, it's really easy to kind of execute those next pieces. And then from here, what you would have done is just got into dynamic rules and then assign the different audience segments or assign the different locations, etc., which I touched a little bit on module 1. But I'm not going to jump too much into it. Cool. So essentially, what we've done is we've got this template. We've discussed with the creative team what's going to be changing, what's not going to be changing, etc. I've pushed it to, I've uploaded it in DV360, made those executions based on those audiences or based on my kind of data-driven elements, whatever you want, whatever you are testing. We've pushed the creative live. We added to a line item in DV360. So now we're going to start running it and testing it. So now it's on a live campaign. And then essentially probably once that campaign's live, etc., just in terms from a media side, what you want to do is target like South Africa. And then what will happen is if the user is in that audience segment or in that location or whatever you set, the creative will swap out. So don't build different kind of line items and targeting on those segments. You don't really need to do that because the triggers are set on the creative. It'll actually swap based on what audience segments or what bucket that person fits into. So less work on the campaign setup, etc., which is really nice. Then once the campaign's running, you really want to kind of start around the learning and optimizing, because you don't just stop here and then you sit back and said we've done data driven creative. You really want to kind of take it to that next kind of piece, learn, and then maybe add some new segments, remove some segments, change the creative, work on the template, etc., etc. And there's a few areas that you want to kind of focus on in terms of the reporting. You really want to kind of look at, what is the path to conversion? Like, how are users exposed to a personalized kind of ad, or, I guess, targeted to an audience segment, that ad? And did they see the ad and did they complete an action later down the line? You also want to kind of track when someone saw something, what was their next action? Did they convert? Or because not everyone clicks on display banners. A lot of people see it and get influenced by it. So you need to kind of really look at the way that you're measuring, because it can't just be last click. You should look at the full journey, because display does influence kind of the conversion path. You can look at also, if people do click on the banner, what is the next step, and do they convert, and what do they do on the site, etc. And then looking at your different segments, potentially you want to see different kind of metrics based on each of those audiences or those segments that you've selected, like the sports, the entertainment, the travel, etc. So a nice way for you to kind of look at it in a different way and then start kind of making calls around this. What's great about this is this should be shared on a weekly call, or whatever your optimization creative calls, with everyone, client, creative, and media. This shouldn't just be an Excel that you share 6 months down the line and then you say the blue button was better than the red button. That's 6 months too late. You should be sitting, looking at this data, optimizing it as much as possible, and everyone should be, the report should be in a way that it's easily understandable. So it's not reams and reams of data. That doesn't make sense. That's just data dumps. That's not a report or insights. Really kind of distill it to make it easy. So on your weekly calls, you can quickly look at the creative, you see which segments are working, and you can make quick edits and quick calls that everyone can understand, because not all good ideas just come from one side. It can come from other areas. And then just start playing around with this and testing, etc., and start scaling it in other areas. So really important is the step 6, and then kind of start going back into step 1, or from step 6 jump into step 4, etc., etc. So how does it all come together? I think this is just a summary of what we've really covered today. It's really around these 6 steps. From the brief to the insights, to kind of designing the creative, to building it, to running the media, and then to measuring it. Essentially, these are the 6 steps that we think that you should start the process with. Of course, you'll have nuances and different businesses. It might be internal teams. It might be all external teams. Just work out on a process on your side. What I would suggest is getting like a core person from the client, core person from creative, core person from media, and then kind of put these Avengers together, and then work through a brief and try execute it on a campaign by itself, and then start working on your own step-by-step guide on what worked, what didn't work, where is it getting stuck, I'm not understanding this, just so you have those key people to actually draft your own step-by-step. But the 6 steps should give you a good guide on where to get to and how to get it. It's also good for everyone to understand the process, not just one person in the business. So get those core people to kind of build a framework that works with you, and then start executing it across it. But yeah, these are kind of the 6 steps. A lot of people, where I would suggest starting, a lot of people like, let's look at a new brief, etc. To be honest, you're probably running always-ons currently. So what are those always-ons? Are you just running the same banner with three frames and a call to action that's been running for the last 6 months? How can you change that? How can you kind of look at that? So you've got loads of campaign data that's already there. Look at those insights, put it into a brief, and then kind of go down this process again, because that's a really good way for you to free up some time. So if you aren't rolling out always on creatives the whole time, how can you make them a little bit data driven, or easily be kind of editable? I lost my words there a bit, but to kind of be editable, because then you share a new image to the team, they upload it, and you're running refresh creative within a day. It's not taking weeks to roll out, etc., etc. So something definitely to go down. And then when I think the key steps, there's a lot of key steps here, but I think where the creative is involved is really deciding on that template, because that template is essentially what everything's going to be built around. And like Artel is showing, you can do animations, you can do lots on it. So I don't think it has to be a static piece. You can do a lot, but it's good to get an agreement of what is this template going to look like, or what is this creative going to look like? What are we going to change, etc., is extremely important, because what we usually see is you don't think about that, then you've built the banners and you're trying to rejig it and it just doesn't work. So you really need to, get approval from client and say, look, this is the template on a PDF, and say, do you agree with this? And this is going to be changeable. And here's 2 examples of how it's going to change. Yes, you approve. Great. And then you start moving into production of the other elements, of the other T-shirts, etc., etc. It's probably the easiest way to go about it. And yeah, I think there's no magic formula. It's just test and learn, essentially. Again, there will be different areas and different ways for you to execute this within your teams. Maybe you've got internal teams, external teams. It's just how you do it. But I really think it's kind of the way you need to go. I mean, Art was touching on the relevance piece, that, creative is 70% of creative performance, or campaign performance, is down to creative. That's insane. So you can optimize as much as you want, but if the creative isn't speaking to that person, or kind of resonating with that kind of audience, or that target market, it's just not going to work. So really start thinking about it, really starting putting this into practice. But again, there might be some stumbling blocks, but just get stuck in and start using it, and then take it from there. And that's it. So I'm going to say, Art, I don't know if you want to say, from my side, I just want to say thanks for joining the session, or watching the session. And yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Marcel, and thank you everybody for joining in. We hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, please reach out to your
I think we lost Art there, but just reach out to your account managers at Google if you've got any questions. Reach out to us directly, but it's probably best just to reach out to the account managers. And yeah, we're here to definitely chat. And if there's any questions, yeah, send them through. But have an awesome day. Cheers, everyone.